In the ancient lands of the Efik people in southeastern Nigeria, there lived a king who had a daughter named Princess Afiong. Afiong was extraordinarily beautiful, with smooth, glowing skin, bright, intelligent eyes, and a smile that could light up any room. Her beauty was legendary throughout the land and beyond. But Afiong had one serious flaw that troubled her parents greatly, and that was her overwhelming pride. From a young age, everyone praised Afiong's beauty. Servants, nobles, and strangers all commented on her exceptional looks. All this attention filled her head with thoughts of superiority. She began to believe she was too beautiful for anyone in her father's kingdom or the neighboring kingdoms. She thought no ordinary man could possibly be worthy of her hand in marriage. When Afiong reached marriageable age, suitors came from everywhere. Warriors who had proven their bravery came with battle scars and stories of honor. Wealthy merchants arrived with control over trade routes and promises of continued luxury. Princes from neighboring kingdoms brought impressive entourages with gifts of gold, ivory, fine cloth, and rare spices. Successful farmers who owned vast lands offered stability and prosperity. Master craftsmen whose skills were renowned throughout the region presented themselves as candidates. But Princess Afiong rejected them all. She found fault with every single suitor. One warrior was too scarred and rough. A merchant smelled of palm oil. One prince had a nose too large. Another prince was too short. A farmer had dirt under his fingernails. A craftsman's shoulders were uneven from his trade. One man's voice was too deep, another's too high. One man's laugh was too loud, another too quiet and boring. Her father called her aside and told her she was being unreasonable and foolish. He explained that marriage was about finding someone with good character who would treat her well, provide for her, and stand by her through life's challenges. He reminded her that outer beauty fades, but inner qualities like kindness, wisdom, courage, and loyalty last forever. He pointed out she was rejecting good men from families he knew and trusted. Her mother also tried to counsel her. She shared how she had married the king, not because he was the most handsome man, but because he was wise, kind, and showed promise as a leader. She explained how their love had grown deeper over the years. She warned Afiong that judging men solely by appearance was dangerous and could lead to terrible consequences. The elders also spoke to the proud princess. These wise old people had witnessed countless marriages and understood what truly mattered in choosing a life partner. They told her stories of beautiful people who married other beautiful people only to find misery because there was no substance beneath the attractive surface. They shared cautionary tales of young women who rejected good suitors searching for perfection only to end up alone or trapped with charming strangers who turned out to be cruel or dishonest. But Princess Afiong would not listen to anyone. She declared publicly that she would never marry any man from her father's kingdom or neighboring kingdoms. She said all the men she had seen were old, ugly, and beneath her standards. She announced she would only marry the most handsome man in the entire world, someone whose looks matched her own exceptional beauty. She wanted a prince from a far-off land, someone exotic and mysterious that no one had ever seen before. Meanwhile, far away in the spirit world that exists between the realm of the living and the dead, there lived a skull. This was not human remains, but a spirit entity that had never been fully alive. It was simply a bare skull, hollow and empty, with dark eye sockets and a permanent grin. This skull heard rumors from the mortal realm about Princess Afiong and her legendary beauty. More importantly, it heard about her pride and impossible standards for a husband. When the skull learned that Afiong would only marry the most handsome man in the world, it saw an opportunity. The skull realized that her vanity and focus on physical appearance made her the perfect target for deception. If it could make itself appear as the most handsome man imaginable, it could win her hand and claim her for the spirit world. The skull had no body of its own, so it devised a clever plan. It went throughout the spirit world, visiting other entities and borrowing body parts. From one spirit friend, it borrowed an exceptionally handsome head with a strong jaw and noble forehead. From another, it borrowed a strong, muscular body with broad shoulders. It borrowed powerful arms from one spirit and tall, athletic legs from another. It borrowed sparkling eyes, a melodious voice, and fine clothes fit for a wealthy prince. Each spirit loaned these parts temporarily with the understanding they wanted them back. When the skull assembled all these borrowed parts, the transformation was remarkable. Where once there was a hideous bare skull, now stood the most handsome man anyone could imagine. He was tall, perfectly proportioned, with a face so handsome it seemed almost unreal. He looked exactly like the kind of man Princess Afiong had declared she was waiting for. The skull traveled to Afiong's kingdom and positioned itself at the market on a day when the princess would be there. Market day was not just for buying and selling, but a social occasion when young women might be seen by potential suitors. When Princess Afiong arrived dressed in her finest attire, with coral beads and bronze jewelry, her eyes fell upon this handsome stranger, and she stopped as if struck by lightning. Never had she seen a man so handsome. He was everything she had imagined. His clothes were exotic, confirming he was from some distant place. His face seemed impossibly perfect. Afiong felt her heart race. A feeling swept over her, a mixture of attraction, excitement, and vindication. Here was proof she had been right to reject all those other suitors. The skull smiled charmingly and introduced itself as a prince from a kingdom beyond the Great River Mountains. It told elaborate stories about palaces of white stone, exotic gardens, and unimaginable wealth. Everything it said was designed to make Afiong believe this stranger was not just handsome, but also wealthy and noble, from an even more impressive background than her own. Princess Afiong was completely captivated. Within a very short time, she decided this was the man she would marry. She had spent years rejecting suitors she had known all her life, but now she was ready to marry a complete stranger after one conversation, all because he looked like what she wanted. She brought the stranger to her father's palace to request permission to marry him. When the king and queen saw him, they were initially impressed by his appearance, but felt deeply uneasy. Something seemed wrong, though they couldn't identify exactly what. The king asked many questions about the stranger's background, family, and kingdom. The skull answered smoothly, but the more it talked, the more the king sensed something was off. The king and queen called Afiong aside privately and expressed their concerns. They knew nothing real about the stranger. They could not verify his claims. They reminded her she had rejected many good men from families they knew well, yet now wanted to immediately marry a complete stranger just because of his looks. They begged her to slow down and give them time to investigate his claims. But Afiong refused to listen. She was angry they were questioning her choice. She accused them of being unable to recognize quality. She declared that if they did not give permission immediately, she would leave with the stranger anyway and marry him without their blessing. The king and queen were trapped. They were almost certain something was wrong, but knew if they forbade the marriage, Afiong would run away with him, which would be even more dangerous. Reluctantly, they gave their permission. A grand wedding was quickly arranged. After the wedding, Afiong prepared to leave with her new husband to travel to his supposed kingdom. Her parents tried one last time to convince her to reconsider, but she was eager to depart. The skull declined the king's offer of guards and attendants, saying they should travel alone. So, Princess Afiong and the skull departed on foot from her father's kingdom. They traveled for hours, moving away from civilization into wilderness. As they reached an isolated section where no one could see them, the borrowed body parts began demanding their return. The first spirit appeared and demanded its legs back. Afiong watched in horror as her husband's legs and flew away. Then another spirit came for the arms. One by one, spirits reclaimed their loaned parts. The chest, the head, the eyes, the voice, the clothes, all dissolved away. Finally, nothing remained but the skull in its true form, a bare skull with hollow eye sockets and a permanent grin. It was the complete opposite of everything Afiong thought she was marrying. Princess Afiong cried and begged to go home. She promised she would listen to her parents and never again judge men by appearance alone. But the skull refused. She had made her choice despite warnings. She was now bound to it. The skull commanded her to follow it to its home in the spirit world, and she had no choice but to obey. They crossed into the spirit realm and arrived at the skull's crude hut, where it lived with its ancient mother. Afiong was put to work doing back-breaking labor, fetching water, gathering firewood, cooking strange food, and cleaning constantly. Days turned to weeks and months. She became thin and exhausted, her beauty fading from the hard work. But the skull's mother eventually took pity on her. When the skull's son left on a journey, the mother gave Afiong directions and magic items to help her escape back to the human world. Afiong fled and ran through the terrifying spirit landscape until she finally crossed back into her own world. When she emerged near her father's kingdom, people barely recognized the thin, ragged woman, but they helped her, and word spread that Princess Afiong had returned. Her parents embraced her with overwhelming joy and relief. Afiong had learned her lesson about pride, vanity, and judging people by appearances alone. She understood now that character, kindness, and substance matter far more than a handsome face. She had married based on looks alone and nearly lost everything because of it.